The deed felt heavier than paper should. I'd been reading the same line for 2 days. To my nephew, Clayton Reeves, I bequeathed the cabin and all appurtenances, and still, when I topped the last rise and saw smoke in the chimney, I thought I'd misread it again. Frost shelled the grass. 5 horses grazed where my uncle used to stack firewood, steam breathing from their nostrils. I slid out of the saddle and listened. A woman's laugh drifted through the chinks, then the clatter of a pan. Hearing voices where there should be none made my heart thud. I stepped onto the porch and knocked. The door opened. She stood there, tall, composed, dark hair braided tight. Her eyes went over me the way a rancher sizes a colt. "You must be Clayton," she said. "I am," I said. "Well, coming out of the cold," she answered, already turning. "Breakfast's on." The cabin I remembered was rough pine and bachelor clutter. The room I walked into had order and purpose. Quilts on bunks, a long table with a runner, copper pots over the hearth. For other women looked up, one dusted in flour, one with a needle madère, one at the stove, and one by the window with a ledger. It was me who felt like the intruder. Clayton Reeves, the braided one, said, "I'm Clarabelle. That's Ruby, Sadie, Violet, and Grace." They nodded. I took off my hat and found I couldn't set it anywhere that wasn't already claimed. "I believe there's been a mistake," I said. "This cabin has a fire that needs wood," Ruby said, brushing past with split logs. "Sadie, mind the biscuits." Clarabelle's gaze held. "You rode a long way," she said. "Eat first." I'd stepped deeper without meaning to, like a man testing a river and finding it at his waist. Coffee, sage, and wood smoke were already in my lungs. Still, the deed burned in my coat pocket. I took it out and set it on the table between the biscuits and the ledger. "My uncle left this place to me," I said, 3 years ago. The lawyer said it's clear. Grace closed her book and slid the deed closer. "We're familiar with papers that say one thing and mean another," she said. "But we'll look. Maybe we start simple." Violet said from the window, "You hungry, Clayton?" "Hungry doesn't change the ink," I said, though my stomach answered. Clarabelle pulled out a chair. She still hadn't acknowledged the deed. "Sit," she said. "Read while you eat." I stayed standing. Attraction braided with unease. 5 strangers with rhythm, and a claim that wasn't spoken yet, but pulsed in the room. And me, with my name on the line. "My uncle's handwriting," I said, tapping the page, "witnessed and sealed." Clarabelle's mouth quirked. "Your uncle had a habit of making 2 promises at once." Outside, the horses snapped frost from the grass. "If you plan on owning anything up here, Mr. Reeves, you ought to learn what you're owning." I looked at her, then at the room that had become a life. The deed lay from my fingertips to the salt cellar like a narrow bridge over a fast river. I took the chair. "Then teach me," I said, and unfolded the paper, so we could all see whose words we were about to argue with. The coffee was strong enough to make my teeth ache, but I drank it anyway. I needed something to steady me. Each of the women had taken a place around the table, as if we were beginning a council. Clarabelle at the head, Violet still near the window with her sharp eyes, Ruby restless with her hands, Sadie calm but watchful, Grace with the ledger open again. I kept the deed spread in front of us like a shield. "You came for land," Clarabelle said. "But land doesn't stay empty just because paper says so." "It was supposed to," I answered. "My uncle's been dead 3 years. I expected dust and maybe rats." "Not," I stopped myself. "Not us," Ruby finished for me, her tone cutting between offense and humor. I flushed. "Not anyone." Grace lifted a second document, folded 3 times and worn at creases. She placed it neatly beside my deed. "Uncle Jeremiah signed this too. Gave us rights of residence in exchange for care. He wanted the place alive, not abandoned." I leaned forward. My uncle's scrawl stared back at me, dated 2 winters before his death. It wasn't a will, but it bore his signature all the same. "He can't give away the same thing twice," I said, though my voice lacked conviction. Sadie reached across and set her hand on the edge of the page. "He didn't," she said softly. "You own the cabin. We were promised a right to live here as long as we kept it. Two truths tangled. Violet laughed once, short and bitter. And if you drag this to court, it'll be men like Morrison who settle it. Guess how that'll end. At the name, a shadow passed between them. I didn't know who Morrison was yet, but I knew enough to recognize a coil of shared anger. So what do you suggest? I asked, because right now, the law's on one side, your contract on the other, and I'm stuck in the middle. Clarabelle leaned back in her chair, folding her hands. We suggest you stop thinking like a lawyer and start thinking like a man who wants to keep what he inherited. There's another way, one that doesn't leave you fighting us or us fighting you. Her calmness unsettled me more than her sharpness. And what way is that? Ruby's lips curved. An arrangement. The word clung to the air, heavier than smoke. I forced myself to keep my eyes steady. Meaning, Clarabelle said, we don't tear each other apart over scraps of paper. We build something together. You have the deed. We have the contract. Combine them, and you get a home with people who will keep it standing, instead of 5 enemies who will drag your name through the courts and the dirt. Grace shut the ledger with a snap. You can insist on being master, or you can be partner. Decide which man you are. The cabin went quiet except for the fire. My uncle's voice and memory reminded me he'd always lived halfway between honor and mischief. Maybe this was his last trick. I glanced at each of them. Clarabelle's steady gaze, Ruby's restless smirk, Sadie's patient stillness, Violet's sharp suspicion, Grace's cool judgment. They weren't squatters. They were a force. My hand brushed the deed. All right, I said slowly. Tell me what kind of arrangement you have in mind. We never finished the word arrangement. The ground warned us. Steady thuds climbing the floorboards. Violet lifted the curtain. Riders, she said. Ruby thinned the fire. Sadie checked a carbine. Grace slid my deed and their contract into a canvas folio. Who? I asked. Morrison, Clarabelle said. And he doesn't come alone. By the time hoofbeats turned to gravel, the cabin looked like no one lived there, and everyone did. Grace pressed a short, heavy revolver into Clarabelle's palm. My uncle's. Talk first, I said. Doorway's yours, Clarabelle answered. We took the porch, Clarabelle, Grace, and me. Ruby and Sadie melted to the sides. 3 riders came up the path, a broad man in a black coat, and 2 lean ones behind him. The broad man smiled like he owned the sun. Morning, he called. Fine place you've got. It's private land, I said. State your business. He cocked his head. You must be Jeremiah's nephew. His glance skipped to Clarabelle and back. Name's Morrison. I'm here to collect what's mine. You don't own people, Clarabelle said. I own contracts, he answered, producing a packet folded to filth. 5. Purchase fair. These women signed. Coerce, Grace said. Threat and fraud. His eyes cooled. That's so. It is, I said, stepping to fill the doorway. The threshold felt like a drawn line. You're trespassing. Turn your horses and ride. He laughed with a winner's patience. Boy, you think an ink line makes you a wall? Jeremiah cut deals. I honored them. I'm honoring them now. Jeremiah made 2 promises. I said, 1 to me, 1 to them. I'm keeping both. His smile lost shape. You don't know what they are, he said, flicking his fingers toward the women. You don't know where they've been. I do. Then you know why they're not going back, Clarabelle said. Morrison refolded his papers. I'm offering you an easy day, he told me. Hand them over, and I forget your face. You saw my face, I said. These women are under my protection. Morrison measured Clarabelle, then Grace. You think you can guard them from a contract? Paper beats pistol, son. Grace lifted the satchel. That's why we brought paper that beats yours. His smile thinned. We'll see it then. You will, Clarabelle said. Not here. Not now. Not on your terms. We hung there, 3 on a porch and 3 on horses. I remembered how my uncle held a skittish horse. Loose reins, quiet hands. I eased my jaw. You've trespassed, I said. You're told to leave. Next time, meet the marshal with us. Something in his eyes ticked. Enjoy breakfast, Morrison said, turning his horse. I'll be back before supper and we'll settle accounts. He rode away. Only when their noise sank into the trees did I feel the sweat cooling on my back. Clarabelle breathed out. You did fine. I just told a wolf to leave the pen. Sometimes that works, Ruby murmured. And sometimes, Grace added, tapping the satchel, you'd better have the receipts. The sun had climbed higher by the time Morrison's hoofbeats faded into silence. My hands still shook from a nearness of violence, but Clarabelle and the others moved with a kind of sharpened purpose. They weren't rattled. They'd been waiting for this. Clayton, Grace said, laying the folio on the table, you wanted to know what kind of arrangement we meant? This is it. She opened the canvas flap and slid out a stack of papers. Neat, ordered, copied in triplicate. Violet leaned against the door, her eyes on the tree line, while Ruby and Sadie circled close, ready to punctuate every word with presence. These are Morrison's contracts, Grace said. Forged. He drafts them with drunk clerks, forces signatures with threats, then files copies in county ledgers as if they were binding. Clarabelle set Jeremiah's revolver on the table beside the stack. Your uncle hated him. Couldn't beat him in court. That's why he gave us rights here, so someone would keep watch. I picked up a page. The ink looked steady, but the names were jagged, misshapen, nothing like the calm, precise script I'd seen in Grace's ledger. He bought you, I said quietly. Ruby spat into the fire. Tried to. Sadie opened a small cedar box and laid out more letters, receipts, witness accounts. At the bottom, a silver locket. She pushed it toward me. Inside was a miniature portrait of a woman with pale eyes and auburn hair. Margaret, Sadie said. His wife. I asked. His living wife, Clarabelle corrected. He declared her dead to claim her mining rights. She's been hiding in the mountains, waiting for the right moment to surface. We found her last spring. I shut the locket with a snap that felt too loud. The women didn't flinch. You have everything to bring him down, I whispered. That's the point, Grace said. We're not hiding anymore. We're exposing him. But we needed leverage. The deed, this cabin, you. The marshal's been circling, but without landholder testimony, it's our word against Morrison's. So I'm the missing piece. I said. Clarabelle's gaze softened just a fraction. You're more than that, Clayton. You're proof Jeremiah didn't die blind. He trusted you to stand where he couldn't. I looked again at the pile of evidence. Contracts that stank of lies, receipts that told a trail of theft, a locket that proved a living woman had been erased for profit. And if I ride away? I asked. Then we fight without you, Ruby said. And maybe we die doing it. Violet's voice cut in from a window. Hoofbeats again. Every face turned sharp. Grace closed the folio. Sadie pocketed the locket. Ruby hefted her axe, and Clarabelle slid the revolver back into her palm. I stood too, the weight of choice pressing on me. This wasn't about a deed anymore. It was about ruin, his or ours. The hoofbeats didn't come alone. Bits jingled, leather creaked. Men spoke like they expected to be obeyed. When Morrison reappeared, the sun showed every flaw on his face. He brought 6 this time. Clarabelle's gaze slid past him. 3 more riders angling in from the creek. Dusters, star badges bright, rifles carried with discipline. Marshal, Clarabelle called. The lead rider pushed back his brim. Clarabelle, Marshal Thorne, acting on warrants from Judge Weber of Hallow Bend. He pointed toward Morrison. Elias Morrison, you're to come with us on charges of fraud, coercion, theft by deception, and unlawful filing. Morrison's smile tried and failed to hold. He kept his horse, strolling like this was a social call. Afternoon, Marshal. You got papers, I suppose? Thorne nodded. A deputy produced a packet with ribbon. The law's paper looked plainer than Morrison's, and truer for it. Before you read anything, Grace said, stepping forward with our folio, take this. Contracts, receipts, sworn statements, and a list of clerks who forget how to spell when he pays them. Thorne accepted it like water. Appreciate your timing, Miss Grace. That Ms., simple as a handshake, told me they'd been working together for weeks. Morrison sidestepped his horse, stealing the center of the yard. This is a mistake, he said mildly. Domestic matters. Misunderstandings. I have contracts. Some men mistake cages for paperwork, Clarabelle said. Step down, Mr. Morrison, Thorne ordered. The deputies spread like a gate closing. Ruby moved half a step, enough to show she wasn't going to back up any room again. Sadie stood still the way only strong people can. Morrison's eyes cut to me. He saw the deed in my pocket and gave me something like pity. Boy, you got between a business and its balance sheet. You think these women will keep you when the dust settles? They'll take your land and sell the boards for kindling. Maybe, I said, maybe I'll help them stack the lumber. He looked to the marshal, then to Clarabelle. Fury crept up his neck, staining the careful calm he wore like a suit. You think the law is your friend, Bella? The law is men I bought last winter. Their replacements will do, Grace said. Thorne's voice stayed even. Last time, Mr. Morrison. Step down. For a second I believed he might. I watched his hands the way my uncle taught me to watch a rattler's coil, not its head. He breathed deep, his fingers flexed. Clarabelle's weight shifted. I could feel the revolver in her palm. Relief edged in, thin as a paper cut. The marshal was here, the packet in Law's hands, the warrants real. And still, under those tidy lines, stood a man with a temper and a habit of getting what he wanted. Morrison smiled again. All right, he said, and started to swing a leg over the saddle. Slow enough to look compliant and fast enough to be lying. The deputies tensed. Clarabelle's breath stopped. The yard went quiet as new snow. I told myself the law would hold. I told myself paper would beat pistols today. But I also knew exactly where Uncle Jeremiah's gun hung on its peg by the door, and how many steps it would take me to reach it if paper lost. He moved faster than I believed a man his size could. Morrison's hand snapped inside his coat, steel flashing. His revolver cleared leather before the deputies even cursed. But he wasn't aiming for them. His barrel locked on Clarabelle. I didn't think. My boots pounded the boards, my hand closing on familiar walnut grip of Uncle Jeremiah's revolver. Morrison's shot thundered, with chips exploding from the post inches from Clarabelle's head. Her braid whipped with the force of air. I leveled and fired. The recoil drove up my arm. Morrison jerked sideways, the bullet catching him deep in the shoulder. He roared like a bull, firing wild. A deputy's rifle cracked, shattering his pistol from his hand. The yard dissolved into shouting, men wrestling Morrison to the ground. His hat spun into the mud, his face a mask of rage and blood. She was mine, he screamed. All of them mine. Clarabelle hadn't flinched. She stood on the porch rail, revolver steady on him. Smoke curling from the barrel. My knees went weak only when I saw she was untouched. Clayton, she said softly, eyes fixed on Morrison. You saved me. I swallowed hard. My chest heaved, the revolver still trembling in my grip. I didn't save you, I said. I chose you. The deputies bound Morrison's arms tight, dragging him upright. Blood slicked his coat. Even beaten, his glare hunted us, promising debts unpaid. Marshal Thorne swung down from his saddle. It's finished, he declared, though his tone carried no triumph. He nodded once to me. Good shooting, son. I hardly heard him. My world narrowed to Clarabelle's steady gaze, to the faint mark on the porch where Morrison's bullet had splintered with inches from her. My stomach twisted at how close I'd come to losing her, losing all of them. Ruby came up behind me, laying a firm hand on my shoulder. Now you see, she said, this was never about land. It's about who stands with who when the lead flies. I looked at them, all five, gathered now in the open yard, the law standing between us and the man who wanted them caged. They weren't just squatters or strangers, or even partners in some fragile contract. They were mine to protect, and I was theirs. Clarabelle lowered her revolver, finally exhaling. The fight's done, she said, for now. But I knew it wasn't just done. Something had shifted inside me with that shot. I was no longer a man chasing an inheritance. I was part of something bigger, messier, more dangerous, and more alive than anything I'd ever known. I slid Jeremiah's revolver back into its holster, my hand steadier now. Whatever comes next, I said, We face it together. Clarabelle gave me the faintest smile, and for the first time since stepping onto that porch, I felt the cabin might truly be mine, because it was ours. Summer didn't arrive all at once. It leaked into the valley the same way trust seeped into my bones. Quietly, after the noise had gone, the marshal hauled Morrison south within the week, his arm bound and his mouth still full of promises he couldn't keep. The day they left, Clarabelle stood on the porch rail again, but this time with her hand in mine. We watched the dust trail thin, then turned back to the work we'd already started. Work was the apology we didn't know each other. We cleared the old corral and set new posts. Ruby swung a mallet like it owed her money and taught me how to match her pace instead of proving mine. Sadie drew a plan on butcher paper, angles and door swings, and where the morning sun pooled, and we framed a lean-to that became 2 rooms before we knew it. Violet scouted timber and strangers both, bringing backboards, rumors, and the kind of grins that mean you out-haggled a man who thought you were soft. Grace measured everything we did as if numbers could keep us honest. 2 weeks in, a packet came by stage, wire copies of the hearing. Elias Morrison, 15 years on state charges, more coming to federal court made good on rumors. 3 county clerks dismissed. A judge retired ahead of removal. Margaret Harper, no longer a ghost, certified owner of 2 mining claims returned to her by order of the court. Her letter was folded inside, a tidy hand thanking, all at Jeremiah's cabin, promising a share of the first clean strike would go to a widow's fund. I read her words aloud on the porch, while the evening cooled the sweat from our backs. Clarabelle didn't say anything, but I watched a knot in her jaw loosen that I hadn't known was there. We formalized what had already happened to us. Grace drew up articles, and I signed them without blinking. Reeves' homestead and stock, held in common, my deed pledged to a partnership with living names on it. Clarabelle took operations. Grace kept the books and the calendar. Ruby broke and trained. She could gentle a blue-eyed devil and curse in 3 dialects while she did it. Sadie managed the gardens like they were a language. Terraces for potatoes, trellises for beans, a drip line from the creek that made the dirt purr. Violet ran procurement and sales, rode to town with our lists, and came back with twice what we could have afforded at half the price we expected to pay. I learned that a man who shoots straight can still hammer a joist crooked. Ruby laughed when I tried to hide mistakes and pressed my hand to the fix until I felt the right resistance. I learned that Clarabelle slept like a cat. 1 ear open, danger measured but not worshipped. At night, we talk about boundaries like grown-ups do when they mean to keep something alive. Who decides an emergency, who can sign on credit, where my say ends and theirs begins. It felt less like swallowing pride and more like tasting water after miles of dust. We added 7 calves in July. The garden went mad, green climbing green. I rose earlier than I used to, before the women, to split wood and watch the light hit the ridge. Most mornings Ruby beat me to it anyway, and we split the silence between us instead of the logs. On Sundays, when no one had the heart to work, we'd read the newspaper out loud and take turns doing poor impressions of the governor, who always seemed to be promising both storms and sunshine. When the next packet came, Margaret's first payout, notarized and honest, we sat around the table and argued about what to do with it. In the end, we put a portion toward a winter roof and the rest in a hidden tin for women who'd show up the way these 5 had, with their names intact but their options gone. Clarabelle called it insurance. I called it the family fund, and no one corrected me. If there was a moment when I knew the danger outside had thinned to weather rather than wolves, it was a night in August when thunder rolled over the ridge and no one flinched. We'd earned stillness. We'd built it with fence posts and legal paper and the kind of jokes people tell when no one is leaving in the morning. I realized then that I didn't miss the life I'd planned. I missed this life when I rode to the creek and back. That's how I knew it was mine. By September, the days shortened, gold light spilling quicker across the valley. We finished a new porch rail, and most evenings I found myself leaning against it with a cup in hand, watching the smoke trail from our own chimney rise straight as a mast. I'd never thought of a house as a living thing before, but this cabin breathed. It held us, demanded of us, and gave back only what we put in. That night, the air was cool enough to see our breath. Clarabelle stepped out beside me. folding her shawl close. She didn't say anything at first, just rested her hip against the post, shoulder brushing mine. The others were inside, laughter and clatter spilling through the walls. "You remember the first thing Ruby said to you?" Clarabelle asked at last. I smiled faintly. Hungry doesn't change the ink. "And the second thing?" I shook my head. She turned, eyes catching mine in the half-light. She asked if you could handle 5. Heat flushed through me, the memory sharper than I like to admit. I recall. Clarabelle's mouth curved in the barest smile. "So? Can you?" I set the cup down, letting the quiet stretch before I answered. "Depends," I said. "Do I have to handle you, or do we handle each other?" Her laughter was soft, almost private. She leaned her forehead to mine. Better answer than I expected. The door opened. Ruby's voice spilled out, teasing Sadie about her bread. Grace followed with a ledger under her arm, Violet with a basket of late apples. They settled around us like the evening was ours to divide. I looked at all of them, their strength, their sharpness, their scars, and felt a weight ease from my chest. I wasn't caught between inheritance and strangers anymore. I was part of something bound tighter than contracts, truer than signatures. "I can handle it," I said at last, "but not alone, not ever again." Clarabelle's hand slipped into mine, warm despite the chill. The others drew close, their laughter weaving to the quiet, until it felt less like daring and more like belonging. The porch creaked under our combined weight, the cabin behind us steady as stone. For the first time since Jeremiah's death, I believed the old man had known exactly what he was doing. He hadn't left me land. He'd left me them. And together, we weren't just surviving an inheritance. We were building one,